A reading from the Gospel according to St. Mark, the 8th chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. Jesus went on with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi, and on the way he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" And they answered him, "John the Baptist, and others Elijah, and still others one of the prophets." He asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter answered him, "You are the Messiah." And he sternly ordered them not to tell anyone about him. Then he began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He said all this quite openly. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and looking at his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." He called the crowd with his disciples and said to them, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. For what will it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? Indeed, what can they give in return for their life? Those who are ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of them the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. You may be seated. Do you know what a homonym is? Lloyd, of course, yes. I wasn't really even looking. I just assumed that you knew. Does anybody else know what a homonym? What's a homonym? All right, well, here's what I got a definition of. Words that are exactly the same, but have two totally different meanings due to the history of the words. So here's a few puns that express what this is. The short fortune teller who escaped from prison was a small medium at large. A thief who stole a calendar got 12 months. Did you hear about the guy whose whole left side was cut off? He's all right now. It's great, I love it. And last, the dead batteries were given out free of charge. Those are homonyms. I think today's gospel has a homonym in it. You're going, what are you talking about? Jesus and Peter both have an idea of what Messiah is, but they have completely different meanings based on history. So let me give you a little bit of context here. So we're in Mark 8. We're halfway through the Gospel of Mark, and Jesus is with his disciples they're in the villages of Caesarea Philippi. Caesarea Philippi was built up by Herod the Great. Herod the Great, you might remember, is around when Jesus is born. And the reason why he's called the Great is because of all of these wonderful structures that he builds, and he builds up the area of Israel. And Caesarea Philippi is named in honor of Caesar, as most things in Rome are named after Caesar. It just depends on which one. And in Caesarea Philippi, in this whole area, there are lots of different temples. Of course, where this is taking place, it's believed it's right in front of the Temple of Pan, who was a Greek god who the Romans took in and named Faunus, and there's all sorts of history in that. But as they're walking towards that, they're passing by some other temples. They're passing by a temple to Caesar Augustus, who has been dead for a number of years at this point, and who the Romans had deified, had decided was a god, Caesar Augustus, a god, who also had the title Son of God, because that's what emperors do. They take on all power, they take on deity, all these type of things is what they do, right? And so they're walking past this, and they see these temples, whether it's to Caesar, Son of God, or to Pan, another god. And Jesus asks, and location is key. There's a reason why Jesus asked this here and not somewhere else, because this is the heart of what Jesus is about. And this is what they're dealing with. And he asks, who do people say that I am? Another way of translating that, more literal sense, is who do people pronounce me to be or announce me to be? Who are they labeling me as? And they get the answer, John the Baptist, others Elijah, and still others one of the prophets. They're missing the mark. Kind of gives Jesus a sense of where things stand. And then he asks, well, who do you say that I am? Who do you pronounce me to be? Who do you label me as? Peter answers him, you're the Messiah. The Greek is the Christos, the Christ, meaning the anointed one. You are the Messiah. Peter has an idea of what that means, and Jesus has an idea of what that means. And they've been walking through, and they've been seeing these temples who have a claim of Son of God and Anointed One. And Jesus has a different idea than Peter. I'm going to come back to this. Who do you say that I am? Who do you pronounce that Jesus is? Who do you pronounce that God is? All of the readings deal with this without even the specific question of it. In Proverbs, go back and read Proverbs again. I swear this could have been written for today. Wisdom cries out in the street, in the square. She raises her voice at the busiest corner. She cries out. Wisdom is screaming out and cannot be avoided. And yet, how long, O simple ones? Simple ones can be translated as naive ones, willfully ignorant ones. How long, O willfully ignorant, will you love being willfully ignorant? How long will scoffers or mockers delight in their mocking? And fools hate knowledge. Who do you say that I am about God? The writer of Proverbs goes through and says who God is. I will pour out my, give heed to my reproof. I pour out my thoughts to you. I will make my words known to you because I have called you and you refused. I've stretched out my hand and no one heeded because you've ignored all my counsel and would have none of my reproof. In other words, who do we say that God is? Can God just be ignored? Is God just some abstract idea? Or is God clearly present and engaged in the life of the world, in our lives, in our world, in our communities? This is pretty harsh. Because of the people here ignoring God and doing whatever they want to do, I will laugh at their calamity. I will mock when panic strikes you. When panic strikes you like a storm and your calamity comes like a whirlwind, when distress and anguish come upon you, they will call upon me, but I will not answer. They will seek me diligently, but will not find me. Because they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord, would have none of my counsel and despise my reproof. Therefore they shall eat the fruit of their way Who do you say that I am? If God is not God, then who is? And what does that mean? Do we put ourselves in place of God? God doesn't need to punish us. We do a really good job of punishing ourselves. That's right here in verse 31. Therefore, they shall eat the fruit of their own way. Self-consuming, we punish ourselves. But it doesn't have to be that way. We finally get the good news of this proverb at the end. But those who listen to me will be secure and will live at ease without dread of disaster. Who do you say that I am? If God is God, then we listen. When we go to James, James talks about the tongue. How great a forest is set ablaze by a small fire, and the tongue is a fire. It is itself set on fire by hell. Wow. We do a number of really great job of self-consuming, self-destructive things, and we punish ourselves. We can see the tongue at work in public events. We can see it. Just go online and read the comment section of anything, and we see the tongue at work. The tongue is a fire. What do fires do? They consume. They destroy. God doesn't need to punish us. We do a really great job of doing it to ourselves. But it doesn't have to be that way. It does not have to be that way. In James, it says, with the tongue we bless the Lord and Father, and with it we curse those who are made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come blessing and cursings. This ought not to be so. It doesn't have to be that way. And then we have our gospel. And we've got this homonym. Same word. Two different meanings. Peter has the meaning of walking by the statue of Caesar Augustus and sees the anointed one in a statue who has a lot of power, a lot of human power, who has a lot of human strength. And he thinks that's the definition of Messiah. And with that comes a lot of destruction. The people of Israel have suffered greatly because of being under the authority of Rome. They will continue to. In a short bit, the temple will be destroyed, and they'll suffer even more. They've suffered, they went through exiles, all that kind of great stuff. But that's the definition that's in Peter's mind. That's the reason why when Jesus offers a definition of what Messiah is, and Jesus says, the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, the scribes, be killed, and after 3 days rise again. That's the definition of Messiah that Jesus has. It doesn't match with Peter's. Peter took him aside and rebuked him and says, Jesus, you have the wrong definition of Messiah. Messiah, historically in the Jewish faith, is one who would be a military general who would come and set Israel free from oppression. And Jesus doesn't use that definition. We're really good at punishing ourselves, whether that's individually, as communities, as a world, whatever, self-consuming, and it doesn't have to be that way. And then Jesus has this statement, if any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. There's a whole lot of stuff that could be said about that. What does it mean to take up your cross? I think most of society has a misunderstanding of what that means, that it's just something that's inconvenient. That's not what Jesus is saying. Definitions are important. What's the good news in this? Who do you say that I am? Jesus asks. Who are you pronouncing Jesus to be? If Jesus is the Messiah, the way that Jesus has defined it, what does that mean for us? It means we can stop punishing ourselves by ignoring God, by whatever words that we're using, by whatever brokenness of relationship and whatnot. Jesus isn't interested in us beating ourselves up. The good news is a message of freeing people. Sometimes it doesn't sound like it. Jesus rebukes Peter, "Get behind me, Satan, for you're setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." Who do you say that I am, Peter? You said Messiah, but you had a human definition of what that is. Be free of that. Let it go. If Jesus is the Messiah, the way that Jesus has defined it, what does that mean for us? What does it mean as far as what we do, what we say, how we interact, what we type, what we write, how we use our money, what our beliefs are? Who do we say that Jesus is? An abstract idea? Or is Jesus the incarnate God who comes, takes on flesh, walks alongside of us, and impacts our very lives, our communities, and the world? If that's who Jesus is, then that changes a whole lot of things. If Jesus is just the Messiah who Peter had claimed, then that doesn't change anything. Who do you say Jesus is? Who do you pronounce him to be? Thanks be to God.